call the meeting to order. Let's take a moment and ask for some guidance in the decisions that we'll be making tonight on behalf of the county, each in your own way. Okay, thank you. Roll call.
Mr. Talbot?
Yeah.
Mr. Eagley?
Here.
Ms. Deering? Here. Ms. Glass? Here. Mr. Craddock? Mr. Merritt?
Here.
Mr. Yaman?
Here. So, no Joe. I'm missing Mr. Craddock. In your package, you have the agenda for tonight's meeting. Are there any additions or changes to the agenda? If not, I entertain a motion to be approved. So moved. Second? Moved and seconded. All in favor of approving the agenda as written, signify by raising your hand. Thank you very much. Also, in your packet are the minutes of November 10th. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? If not, do I hear a motion that be approved as written? So moved. Moved. Is there a second? Second.
Okay.
All in favor of approving the minutes as written, please signify by raising your hand. Thank you. Old business.
We don't have any old business.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, I guess you could call this old business on behalf of the Board of Zoning Appeals in Pittsylvania County. We'd like to thank you for your service to the county and your leadership and your guidance. I think I've been on this board, checked it the other day, 25 years, and all that time you have been chairman. I understand there is an official plaque coming that I think it might have the wrong date on it, but we thank you so much for your support, your leadership, your guidance. Ms. Glass, how long have you been on the board?
I want to say 10 years, maybe 11. I'm not quite sure.
Thank you for that service.
But I've got one more month.
Okay, all right, one more.
Okay.
And we thank you, sir. It's been a privilege.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm going to go ahead and do the chairman's report. It has been my privilege to serve on this board. It's been one of the most gratifying things that I've ever done. It's just especially, zoning can be very intrusive, and this board protects landowners from intrusion on their property, as well as protecting landowners that have a legitimate use, so that the task that you perform is greatly needed. Especially since I think everything we've done has always been without politics involved. It's based on facts. We've got some pretty rigid procedures that indicate if you follow the procedure, the process dictates when we approve or when we don't approve. And y'all done a great job. And it's been my honor to have served in this role. I can remove that from my monthly calendar and not wake up in the middle of the night and say, oh, BCA, you know. I'll do that. So, new business.
So your agenda says no cases for January. That's incorrect. We actually have 2 cases for January. We will have a solar that will be coming in January, and we do have a variance that will be coming before you in January as well.
You sure you don't stay around for that?
I'm not even going to ask what it is. I'll watch for it in the paper. I'm sure y'all will do a good job. And so you get to go out on good note. Okay. All right. With that said, we'll open the public hearing in case S-2. No, we won't either. Well, before we open the public hearing, ladies and gentlemen, pursuant to Article 5, Division 7 of the Pittsylvania County Zoning Ordinance, we, the Board of Zoning Appeals, have been empowered to hear and decide specific applications and appeals in support of said ordinance. In accomplishing this important task, we are charged with promoting the health, safety, and general welfare of the citizens of Pittsylvania County. We must ensure that all our decisions and recommendations be directed to these goals, and that each be consistent with the environment, the comprehensive plan, and in the best interest of Pittsylvania County, its citizens, and its posterity. Anyone here to speak to the board other than the applicant regarding zoning cases will be limited to 3 minutes. Now, we'll open the public hearing in case S-20-019. The time is 7:04. Report.
Case S-20-019, Axton Solar LLC has petitioned for a special use permit on 16 parcels of land, a total of 1,359.74 acres located on Medical Center Road, Sugar Barber Road, Sandy River Road, Retreat Drive, Taylor Road, Moscow Road, Maple Springs Drive, and Plantation Drive in the Tunstall Election District for a utility-scale solar energy facility. The Planning Commission recommended by a 7-0 vote with no opposition that the petitioner's request be granted with the staff's recommended conditions. The staff summary is enclosed in the board packet. Mr. Chairman, Trey Lopez is here to represent the petition.
Good evening.
I don't have any additional materials this evening, based on some of the conditions set forward by the Planning Commission. We're more than willing to accept. Of course, they're here to, any of the requirements that are set forward and address any public comments and feedback regarding the project as well.
Okay, now the conditions that you're referring to, these 17 that were presented at the Planning Commission.
Correct.
For the sake of completeness, I'll read them later, but are there any questions for the applicant this time? Have you had any, what kind of feedback have you got from the neighborhood, did you?
Most of it is just, initial interest regarding, the overall effect to adjacent property owners, illustrated preliminary landscape plans that we have prepared, as well as identifying the setbacks that into inclusion as well. That the vegetative buffers, setbacks from adjacent roads or property boundaries as well.
Okay, when do you think if the permitting process will be complete, you might start construction?
Right now we're contemplating a December 2023 commercial operation date, 12 to 14 months construction, so we're looking at mobilizing for construction 18 months or so, 20 months from now.
Okay. Any questions? All right, we may have some before we're done. Thank you. We do have Wendy Colley. Would you like to address the board?
Yeah, just have a basic question. Good evening. Just had a basic question, because I just was notified about this a little over a week ago. So as far as zoning, for the property that I currently own that borders onto this, is that gonna affect the zoning of that property?
No. That's a question you should probably address, but no, it won't affect the zoning of your property. You're in a residential district now?
Yes.
I would suggest that if you have further questions, that you go by the zoning administrator's office and they can give you a more official answer. But no, there's nothing in this application that indicates that your property would be impacted other than you're adjacent to it. So.
Okay. Yeah, but yes, sir, I did go last week, and I think the lady that was there was on vacation that could answer the question, so.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else wish to address the board before we close the public hearing? If not, we'll close the hearing. Time is 7:08. Okay. I think we've seen one of these before. Any comments?
Mr. Chairman, we've talked about setbacks that, it's a little difficult to determine what's a front and a side and a rear setback on a, when you've got 10 or 12, 13 different tracts of land. Did we address that, or was that something that the board of supervisors may have to address?
So the Board of Supervisors passed amendments to our zoning ordinance at the November meeting that will address that. It requires a standard 150-foot setback. However, that does not apply to any applications that have been submitted to us prior to them adopting that. It would not apply to this, so we would go by the ones identified in their zoning district, unless you choose to set others.
Or the recommendation from the staff is that minimum front setback is 60 feet from the center line of the specified right-of-way, 35 feet from the edge of the right-of-way, whichever is greatest. The side setback shall be 10% of the road frontage distance with a minimum 10 feet. Rear setback minimum 40 feet.
That 150 feet was all around?
Yes. And it does, there is language in the new guide, the new section of the ordinance that states, unless it borders a residential property. If it borders a residential property, it's 200 foot minimum setback. But like I said, that doesn't automatically apply to this.
These setbacks, I don't see how we could have a vegetated barrier. Even 60 feet is probably pushing it a bit. Side setback shall be 10% of the road frontage for a minimum of 10 feet. This is so hard to interpret. So you brought it up. Do you have a suggestion?
I can appreciate I wouldn't want a solar panel 10 feet from my property, I guess.
Well, there's always the issue of the undeveloped property around this. Certainly a setback of 10 feet would certainly impact the adjoining property adversely. What would that? The degree to which it affects the adjoining properties up to us to the side, I guess, is rise to the level that we need to. On the other hand, if you look at the layout, 150 feet all the way around, that's a lot of space.
With so many tracks, that's a concern with so many tracks of land. If you had one contiguous tract of land, that would be more reasonable. Probably the way it's written out, nobody seems to be opposed to it, so we'll have new guidelines in January or February.
So you don't have any changes that you recommend to go with this? Any other comments on setbacks?
10 foot is, the 10 foot is mighty small, and the 60 foot, but I know, I see what you're saying, with some small tracks on here, you take 150 foot all around it, it's not gonna be a whole lot.
The next thing we'll be hearing is applications for variance from that setback.
From the setback.
Yeah, they are.
Well, 10% of the road frontage, for a 10-foot setback, that means they would have 100 foot of road frontage, or less. Still 10 feet is not very much. I mean, again, if you consider vegetated, the requirement for vegetated barrier.
The vegetated barrier has got to be 15 feet wide, so.
Okay.
That takes you to 10 feet.
Okay.
I'm good.
Okay, everybody good with that? Do these 17 differ in any significant way from the pattern conditions?
No, these are the standard 17 conditions that we normally recommend.
And so you have a copy of these are the ones that you've seen presented? No, never mind, I'll read them anyway, just to make sure that they're in the record and there's no. All right, any further discussion? So what's your pleasure? It's my motion. Positive motion? Okay. All right, so the positive motion would read, whereas Axton Solar LLC has petitioned the Board of Zoning Appeals for a special use permit for a utility scale solar energy facility, and whereas we find no substantial detriment to adjacent property, the character of the zoning district will not be changed. Thereby, the such use will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of the ordinance. I move the special use permit be granted with the following conditions. Bear with me. Number one, site development plan, location, all solar panels and other above ground equipment will be located within the project area shown on the conceptual site plan, included with the special use permit application. All site plan requirements of section 35-141 must be met before permits are issued. Height, except for collection yard and substation or otherwise as required by applicable building code, the maximum height of the solar panels and the above ground equipment will be 15 feet. Setbacks, except for fencing and any pole-mounted electronic lines consistent with the county ordinance, all above-ground equipment will have a minimum front setback of at least 60 feet from the center line of the specified right-of-way, or 35 feet from the edge of the right-of-way, whichever is greatest. The side setback will be 10% of the road frontage distance with a minimum of 10 feet. The rear minimum setback will be at least 40 feet. Those setbacks are required between the parcel lines of parcels that are part of the project. Fencing for the project will be standard chain link and at least 6 feet high. The applicant shall maintain the fence for the life of the project. Landscaping applicant will comply with section 35-121 fencing screening. At the perimeter locations, the setback will include a minimum 15 feet wide landscaped area comprised of any existing vegetation supplemented as needed with staggered growth of planted trees or large shrubs. The vegetation must be evergreen and designed to be at least 15 feet in height at maturity. Of any new plantings, there shall be a minimum of 6 feet at the time of planting. Existing vegetation shall be maintained and supplemented with new plantings as needed to maintain required screening. Prior to construction, the site plan approval, a landscaping maintenance plan will be submitted to the zoning administrator for approval, which will provide for the posting of a bond or other surety in an amount sufficient to ensure that the plantings are successfully established and the landscaping is maintained or replaced during the life of the project. Construction management mitigation. Prior to construction, the applicant shall prepare and submit to the zoning administrator a construction management plan to address traffic control methods, site access, fencing, lighting, mitigation of construction operations and hours of construction activity. Road repairs. All public and private roads must remain open during construction. Any damage to roads caused by construction will be promptly repaired to pre-construction conditions and our BOT standards where it be necessary. Erosion and sediment. Prior to construction, the approved erosion and sediment control plan will be implemented for the entire project, and an erosion and sediment control bond will be provided. Stormwater management. Prior to construction, a Virginia Stormwater Management Program permit from the Virginia DEQ will be obtained for the project, including an approved stormwater pollution prevention plan. Operational noise and electrical interference. The project will comply with all applicable county requirements for noise and shall not generate or create electrical interruptions or interference with existing electrical or electronic uses. Operational light, fixed lighting at the perimeter of the project will be limited to gates and will be shielded / damper facing to minimize light spillage and shall be motion activated. Compliance. The project shall be designed, constructed, and tested to meet all applicable local, state, and federal standards. Decommissioning. In accordance with section 35-141E, the applicant shall completely decommission the facility within 12 months if the facility ceases to generate electricity for a continuous period of 12 months, including all solar collectors, cabling, and electrical components, fencing, and other associated equipment, facilities, and structures. Prior to construction and approval of the entire site plan, a decommissioning plan will be submitted to the zoning administrator, which shall provide for the posting of a bond or other surety acceptable to the county in the amount of the decommissioning cost, not including salvage value for the project. Start of construction of the special use permit will expire unless construction of the entire project is commenced within 3 years of the date of issuance of the special use permit. Survival, so long as the project is operated in conformance with these conditions, the special use permit shall continue for the life of the project. Comply with all DEQ regulations regarding pinpoint source pollutants, non-point source pollutants. Chemical sprays used in weed control shall comply with DEQ regulations. Fire and rescue training, the applicant shall provide annual training to the local fire department regarding battery storage. That's your motion.
So moved.
Moved, is there a second? Moved and seconded, all in favor of approving the motion as read, please signify by raising your hands. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming out. So, special use permit case S-20-020 is now open, time is 7:19. Report, please.
Case S-20-020, Luffman Hurdle Real Estate has petitioned for a special use permit on a total of 1.47 acres located on Franklin Turnpike in the Westover Election District for a kennel for boarding dogs. The Planning Commission recommended by 7-0 vote with opposition that the petitioner's request be granted with the staff recommended condition. The staff summary is enclosed in the board packet. Mr. Chairman, Laura Luffman and Lisa Hurdle are here to represent the petition.
Good evening. I'm not sure how this process works. I'm assuming you all understand about what we're asking for. We own Mount Herman Animal Medical Clinic, which is right next door to this proposed property. And so on this piece of property, there is a small home that we would like to use for indoor doggy daycare for it. We have an outdoor doggy daycare at our present location, but we don't have enough room in our facility for the dogs to go when it's cold, or it's wet, or it's snowy, or it's too hot. And so we need to have a place that they can go to rest and coming out of the elements. And also we have an attendant out there with them that also needs to come and get out of the elements. And so that's what we want the property for, basically.
Okay. Questions?
If I heard you correctly, the house will be used for indoor.
That's
Kennel.
correct. We have a really nice outdoor space where we are already.
Right.
So the house is for indoor only.
So the yard behind the house,
We're not really planning on doing anything with that yard.
it's
There's
right
a-
next to those apartments.
That's right. And we don't have any needs for that. What we have in our existing site is enough space for the dogs on the outside area. Again, we don't have enough building space on our lot to build anything everything we're using inside, we already have a use for that space. But we need a place to take the dogs if it's cold, wet, too hot.
So this facility at the house, everything would be inside, there's no outside?
There's no outside area at all. There would have to be, because let's say, then we take the dogs over and they have to go, somebody needs to go potty, because these are all house-trained dogs. There'll be a small lot adjacent where the attendant can walk one dog outside and back
Right.
in, but there wouldn't be, it's not doggy daycare. We don't want to have 10 dogs outside in that space.
Okay, any questions? And your operating hours, like when you might be exercising the dogs?
Monday through Friday, well, we wouldn't be out there any later than 5:30, I think is the condition. Our attendants usually get there between 7:30 and 8 in the morning, and then the last walk would be in the evening. And then everybody, goes back inside at night. There's no outside dogs, of course.
So you would be walking after 5:30 or
No, sir.
2 a.m.? or-
No, sir.
Okay. Any other questions? We may have some in a minute, thank you.
Okay.
Okay. We do have one person signed up to speak, Jeanette Bell.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Jeanette Bell, and I am the current property owner of 3608 Franklin Turnpike. My parents owned the property there for over 60 years, and I am here in support of the proposal for the property. The animal clinic has been a great neighbor with no issues to report, And there has been a vet at that location since the early 80s. They have shown great interest in maintaining the property, and I do wish them much success. I feel that the vision that the vet clinic has for their business, that this would be a great asset for the Mount Hermon and the surrounding areas. And I would like to thank you in advance for your consideration of approving this proposal.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board before we close the public hearing? If not, we'll close the hearing at 7:24. Okay, now are there any adverse effects that we can identify that aren't covered by the staff recommendation that the time pets are allowed outside shall be limited to between 7:30 and 5:30? The addition of this inside facility, are there any other conditions, or any other adverse effects we need to consider?
And I'm for the project, and I'm concerned about the noise level of the people who live there. You've seen the facility, the apartments are right up against the backyard of this house. And I work at a place that right up the road is a Hollywood pet thing. And you can hear dogs like several blocks down the road. It was really,
Are they outside or inside?
outside.
They're outside.
And so, my concern is if we issue a special use to this property, what prevents them from moving more kennel space outside into the yard. You see, they already have, well, I'm not saying you've got space in the kennels behind the facility now. What would prevent them from expanding that if you give a permit? Or can we say that space cannot be expanded?
Well, the condition says the time pets are allowed outside shall be limited between 7:30 and 5:30.
Well, you got people who work third shift and sleep during the day.
Right.
And I mean, it's not like everybody works round back.
Well, do you think that with the dogs being exercised, I mean, on leash, do you think that is
No, not at all. But my point is, if we issue a permit for this, and they decide we need more outdoor space for them, what will prevent them from doing that?
well, issuing a special use permit is two-edged sword. Number one, the permit doesn't exist today. So if we issue a permit that says time pets are allowed outside shall be limited between 7:30 and 5:30, then if they want to expand the use, they'd have to come back and get the special use permit revised.
Yeah, but I think, excuse me, what Ronald is saying is there's a large amount of land behind the dwelling.
You mean the additional dwelling or the existing?
The additional dwelling.
Right, there's a lot of land.
That they're saying they have no intention of turning into an outdoor kennel.
Right.
Right. And that's fine, and I appreciate that. But even though you have a time limit on what they can have animals out there, in the daytime, can they build a kennel to keep dogs out there all the time?
Well, and as I see it, no, because that would be an expansion of the use, so they'd have to come back and get another special use permit. Now, that would require us first to go to the zoning administrator and get her opinion, right?
No.
And she said no, then it's what's that subject to appeal. She said yes, then it would come.
I just want to be sure there's people up at that.
I understand. It's hard to say, you can't do this, you can't do that, because you could imagine all kinds of uses. But like I say, that's the double-edged sword of the special use permit. By design, zoning is permitted. The zoning ordinance tells you what you may do. And if it's not included, then you may not do it. Right? So, now the only thing, this is, the time pets are allowed outside. It doesn't specify that that's for exercise on a leash.
All right, well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
Sure.
interrupt. The applicant says the applicants are proposing, excuse me, to use the existing dwelling, which is the house,
Roger.
as an indoor boarding space.
Yes.
Can we specify that that's all that building can be used for, or, and that lot?
Yeah, well, we could,
Is that-
did you really think it's necessary?
Well, I don't know.
Maybe I'm the only business, but I just feel like that, something on my mind is we issue a special use for the kennel.
Right.
In my mind, a kennel can be inside or outside. And that whole property is just part of a special use. It's not just the house. Am I right? It's the whole
Yes.
shebang.
Yes.
So, and I believe what these nice ladies are saying, and I'm not, but I'm saying if down the road they choose to expand their existing kennel over to the backyard of this house, we've approved that because we approved a special use for a kennel on that property. Yeah, am I looking at that wrong?
No, that's correct. So if you approve a special use permit for a kennel, the kennel could be operated indoor or outdoor. Our zoning ordinance does not separate the two.
Right.
However, you can place a condition on it, that would not allow outdoor boarding for
Right.
dogs.
That's
Per the paragraph that they have requested,
yeah.
or they have proposed themselves. The applicant's proposing to use the existing dwelling as an indoor boarding space for the doggy daycare. All that.
Well, but see, that's in the application, that's not necessarily in the motion unless we.
But for that, right, unless we,
So the existing, so the proposal, outside of exercise of pets shall be limited to 7:30 to 5:30. Let's say supervised outside, supervised outside exercise of pets shall be limited to 7:30 to 5:30. That's basically what the staff recommended. But else, so you want another condition on the special use permit addressing the plot behind the,
Right, the house can be used as the kennel. No,
the dwelling as an indoor.
So you could do a condition that just said no outdoor boarding, at this property. And that would cover them expanding the space outside,
all right, well, but, ma'am, do you currently have outside kennels where dogs have an outside run and?
At our present location at the Mount Hermon Animal Clinic, yes, we have outdoor runs there and we have outside doggy daycare. And that's why we don't need it at this location. At the adjacent property, what we have is sufficient for our outdoor space. I would not anticipate we have a really nice outdoor space. We don't need any more outdoor space.
yeah, and I appreciate that, but my point is, that once we approve that, they have that option to expand.
Okay, well, let's just see how we protect that piece of, that parcel behind the dwelling, because as written, this is an application for the facility, right? So the existing use of the outside kennels, of course, would continue, but on this parcel behind the house, that's where you're concerned. All right, so how would you, what's the specific address of that house, of that dwelling?
3608.
that dwelling is that and then the property behind it, that's the only one, it doesn't include their current operation, the special use permit application. The current animal clinic is not part of the special use permit application.
Uh-huh. And what's the address of the current use? 3608.
3620.
There you go.
36 what?
3620 is our location.
Wow, what happened to it? 10, 12, 14? I think those same guys numbered the houses on my road. Okay, all right. So, condition number 2, just for clarification, this special use permit applies to 3608.
3608.
What's the road?
Franklin Turnpike. Is that right? Is that are we talking about the right piece of property? 3608, is that the dwelling?
So we go by GPIN numbers.
Okay.
So the
I was just looking at the realtors,
What's that?
So the GPIN numbers for the two parcels that are in this application are 2410-44-7607 and 2410-44-6588, which is the property the house is on, and there's a vacant property kind of behind that, which is on your map.
So just reviews.
So it does not take into their current operation.
So those two GPNs wouldn't encumber the current operation?
No.
That's two.
So any conditions that you put on here on this special use permit will apply to both of those pieces of property, not one or the other unless you specify that.
And 2410.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
So any conditions that you attach to the special use permit will apply to both that 2410-44-7607 and 2410-44-6588, which is where the house is. So any conditions will apply to both of those pieces of property.
I like her statement, no outdoor,
Right.
whatever.
Right.
And that way they can only use the house. Now, if they want to expand that, they can come back.
Come back and do it again.
They would have to add to
That's
that.
all we
Yeah.
have on.
That's what we're, that's what you're looking
But you want those written in rather than just, okay. I mean, administratively, it's probably already there, written in. But, all right, so the conditions would say, supervised outside exercise of pets shall be limited to 7:30 to 5:30 on this property. This special use permit applies to GPN 2410-44-7607, 2410-44-6588. And that no outside kennels or runs will be allowed.
Right.
And I think we ought to put that, the parcels in here because it is confusing. Is it one operation or, no, this applies only to that house.
They're gonna have, so they are proposing to have a run.
Right.
So I wouldn't specify I would just say no outdoor boarding, because they are proposing a fenced-in area for bathroom to take
Right.
the dog out to go potty.
That's fine.
So if you specifically say no outdoor runs, then we won't be able to allow them that
Well,
one
that's not a
outdoor
run,
run.
that's just for getting from one place to the other.
That's a run. That's
Yeah.
considered a run.
Well, I know, but that wouldn't be a kennel, they're not gonna let dogs run loose in that area.
Right, but if you specifically state in your condition that no runs are allowed.
Okay, we'll take care of the conditions, thank you. All right, so what? Now, supervised outside exercise, let's see. All right, the parcels are specified in the application, so we'll let that suffice, and we'll not include that as part of the narrative on the conditions. So the two conditions would be supervised outside exercise of the pet shall be limited to 7:30 to 5:30. And second condition would be no outside kennels or runs will be allowed then.
I would just say
No outside.
Indoor.
Okay, all right.
No outdoor
This is
kennel.
better. That would say only indoor, that takes care of that.
Yeah.
So only indoor kennels. And that takes care of all this outside. Okay. So supervised outside exercise of pets shall be limited to 7:30 to 5:30. I guess that's AM and PM. And then only indoor kennels are allowed. Those are the two conditions. Any other conditions required to protect any other adverse effects we need to address if possible? Whew, okay. That's a marvelous 1,600 acres solar. All right. So, positive motion?
Yeah.
All right, so the positive motion would read, whereas Luckman Pearl Real Estate LLC has petitioned the Board of Zoning Appeals for a special use permit for a kennel for boarding dogs, and whereas we find no substantial detriment to adjacent property that the character of the zoning district will not be changed thereby, and this said use will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of the ordinance, I move the special use permit be granted with the following conditions. 1, supervised outside exercise of pets shall be limited to 7:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Only indoor kennels are allowed. Is that the motion?
And I like it.
We got a motion, we have a second? Second.
Does she agree to the condition?
Yes.
Yes.
Good.
All right, so all in favor of this motion, please raise your hand. Thank you.
So moved.
Thank you, thanks for coming out.